Now we are moving to our second speaker, who is Miranda Crowhurst. Now, a little bit of information about Miranda. She is Twinkl's ESL Creative Manager, and she is also a key player in Twinkl's ESL strategy, resource production, and marketing. With 10 years of teaching experience, she is also the co-founder of Language Connection, which is a language institute in Bolivia. And she also recently completed her MBA with the University of Birmingham. She is best known for her Hey English videos, which has been watched by millions online. Such a pleasure to have you with us, Miranda. Miranda's presentation is going to talk about and discuss boosting creativity in ELT classroom.
Yeah, great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, great.
Great, okay, and can you see my presentation?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, fabulous. Okay, I'll get cracking then. All right, so today we're going to talk about boosting creativity and giving some really practical, simple things that you can do in your classroom to help your students feel creative. And the reason is that, like you said, that's my job title. My job title is to be creative. And so it's something I think about a lot. And today we're going to be taking inspiration from Shakespeare, from TikTok, and from the famous skateboarder Tony Hawk. You don't often see those three in a presentation together, but today we're going to talk about all three. So I'd like to start off with a question for you, which is, that was the answer, not the question, which is, how do we know when our students are being creative? I'll say that one more time. How do we know when our students are being creative? That's a difficult question. How do we know? Any ideas, anyone? You can type your answers in the chat box. They try something new, they take chances, they're not afraid of making mistakes. Well, yeah, I'm going to say they produce something with enthusiasm. I love that too. That's beautiful, looking at their eyes. I totally see where you got that from, or the road less taken. Very cool. So yeah, I think those definitions are great. Going back to Elena's definition, I would say that is spot on. What they're doing is producing, they're producing something that is new to them. And that's really crucial, because your student might be doing maybe a beautiful drawing in class, but you don't know that maybe they've copied that drawing from something else. So maybe it looks like something new for you, but it's not something new for them. On the other hand, maybe a student says something that you have heard from other students in years past, but it's something that is new for that individual. So yeah, I would say if you're looking for creativity in the classroom, look for students that are doing something new. And often, like you said, that involves making mistakes. When we're doing something new, that's probably going to be imperfect. It's going to involve failure. So yeah, look for the people taking chances. Exactly. Great answers, you guys. So yeah, that's the thing we're going to be focusing on, helping students produce something that's new for them. So how can we help students produce something that's new for them and make sure that they're not afraid about making mistakes? So we're going to take a 3-step approach. The last step, the very final thing you're going to do, is to set creative tasks in your classroom. But I think there's 2 steps that we can do before then. The first thing is creating that environment of kindness and curiosity. If students don't feel safe sharing their ideas, if they think that they're going to get a bad reaction, either from you or other people in the class, other students, then they're very unlikely to share their ideas. So it's about setting the right, kind of atmosphere. And I'm going to give you some practical tips on how to do that. The second is making sure that students know that all students can be creative. This is not something that's just for, you know, the one student in your class who's great at singing, for example. This is for absolutely everyone, regardless of, you know, what they feel they're really good at, or what their career goals are, you know. And finally, the last step is setting creative tasks. That's the final thing that we want to do. So let's start with creating an environment of kindness and curiosity. The first thing that I want you to do is change the way you talk about your own creations in class. So if you're maybe drawing something and you always apologize for your drawings, I know I do this all the time. Or if you are like, oh, I'm sorry, my acting is so bad, my miming is so bad, my singing is so bad. Students are going to learn that they should feel that same shame. So if we want our students to feel positive about sharing their own creativity in class, then we need to feel, you know, we need to help them develop their own self-talk by monitoring the way that we talk about our own creations and our own, like, our own mistakes and our own failures. So that is the first tip that I would give you. The second thing is that creativity doesn't run on a schedule. So I'd like you to imagine that you have just told your students about the homework for your for the weekend, and then you ask who has a question, and one of your students raises their hand and says, "Why can we eat salad but not grass?" If you're the teacher in this situation, what would you say back to Taylor Swift if she asked that question in your class? What is your response to the question, why can we eat salad but not grass? What would you say? It's not, Elena's on point today. Yeah? Any other answers? What would you say back? Ah, okay, I love this one from Nabila. Yes, so yeah, okay, great. It's salad is grass. Yeah, okay, great. So I think, you know, when I started teaching, I probably would have looked at the student and said, you know, I meant questions about the homework. And that immediately says, my classroom is not a place to ask creative questions because they're not worth my time. The second thing that I might have said is like, oh, that's a good question, but I don't have time for this. You go home and research it, which kind of says, okay, now this is worth your time, but it's still not really worth my time and other students' time. But I think, you know, these answers are great, you know, like, well, what do you think? As a starting point, or like, well, does anyone know the answer? So coming, grass is not for eating, but why is the question, why? If you want to, you can eat grass. Yeah, exactly. You know, like coming up with different ideas, encouraging that creativity in your classroom, even if it's not on your schedule, especially if it's not convenient. And even if you think you know the answer, you know, check that. Do I actually know the answer? Why can we digest salad? Why can we digest a lettuce leaf? But if I go out to the garden and I eat up the lawn, I'm going to feel sick. Why is that? So yeah, you know, remember that creativity does not run on a schedule. And also we need to be really, really sensitive to our students in their feedback to their creativity. This is a quote from the Game of Thrones. They're talking about their father and they say everything before the word but doesn't count, basically. They say something a bit ruder, but I'm not going to say it today. And that means that, you know, when we say, oh, to our students, oh, this is good, but, you know, there's basically our students are not going to feel very like their creativity has been well appreciated, maybe. So some phrases that you might like to use in your feedback for creative tasks are, or all tasks, are, I love this and instead of but, And it would be even better if blah, blah, blah. Or if you have, maybe A1, A2 level, lower level students, you can say, I love this and we can. So that's my final tip for creating a kind atmosphere in the classroom towards creativity, is take out the word but from your feedback and put in the word and instead. Okay. So, got to move my chat box. So the next thing we've got to do after creating our environment of kindness and curiosity is develop our students' creative identity. And to do that, we're going to have to start by busting some myths, changing some of their self-perceptions. So some things that you might hear from your students are, firstly, maybe I'm not creative. I'm not a creative person. And it's really important that students know that creativity is a skill that they will learn and that they will develop. It's not that some people are creative and other people aren't creative. Everyone is a creative person. We just need to practice, using our creativity, a bit like muscles. We need to go to the gym to build our muscles. We need to practice our creativity to build our creative brain. And other things are that it's only for artists, or it's not important for me. Maybe they want to be an accountant or an engineer. Well, creativity is really important for engineering. And creativity is one of the skills that employers look for most in the biggest industries in the world, including business. So when students say, well, I don't want to be an artist, so this isn't for me, it absolutely is for you. And it is really essential to, their development in terms of critical thinking and those higher level thinking skills as well. So it's important for all of your students. And this is where Tony Hawk comes in. I watched a documentary about Tony Hawk about a month ago on HBO. And it was really, really interesting to me because one of the things they talked about is how bad Tony Hawk was when he started skateboarding, because he was just so skinny. All of the other skateboarders had a lot of muscle. They were able to do incredible tricks because they were so much bigger than him, and he was tiny and he couldn't do the tricks that these guys could do. But because of that, he had to become twice as creative as they were. And because he wasn't so creative, he basically invented a new way to do all of these tricks that was much better in the end. And of course, now we know him as the most successful, most famous skateboarder of all time. So remind students that if something is difficult for that, exactly, Bruce, turning pain into power, taking something that's difficult and saying, because I find this difficult, that's going to give me a different perspective from everybody else. And that can be your superpower. I call it the Tony Hawk principle. I don't think that's a real thing, but that's what I like to call it. So you can absolutely say to students, just because you find this difficult, it doesn't mean it's not for you. You can actually do better than anyone else if you work twice as hard and be creative. Yes, exactly. And then sometimes if your students just aren't feeling confident in their creativity, think about using physical props to help them feel more confident. There was an amazing psychological study done that said that got a load of people and made them do karaoke. I think they were singing Bon Jovi, and they had people singing Bon Jovi in their normal clothes, and they had some people singing Bon Jovi with like a cap or a bandana and some sunglasses to make them feel a little bit different. And those physical props, that costume, if you will, helped them to be more confident in singing. And they actually sang better and louder. So when we think about costumes in class, these aren't just for presentations in front of parents or in front of other students. You can use them every day in your lessons to help students feel confident doing a role play or inventing a conversation. So if you don't already, I really advise you to keep in your classroom some hats, some sunglasses, some capes, something that will just make them feel funny, exactly, help them to feel free. That was beautifully put. And even some puppets. Some students who are really, really shy and don't want to invent conversations, maybe find it easier to talk through a puppet because it feels less personal. Creativity is extremely, extremely personal. So the final thing, following on from Nathan's talk, I hope really well, is, different cultures make different assumptions about creativity. I wish I could give you some specific tips, but because, we're from all over the world, these are going to be very different for all of you. But have a think about what your students' cultures say about creativity. Maybe that's who can be creative, or what successful creativity looks like as well. Because these things are relative and we might need to challenge some of those in the classroom. So onto creative content, that's the final step, right? So we fostered this environment of kindness and curiosity. We've helped students connect and believe that they themselves are a creative person. And then we're moving on to creative tasks. Now, the easiest thing you can do, the simplest thing you can do, is use some simple questions in your ordinary classroom, in your day-to-day classes, that help students to think creatively. Sorry, I forgot my English for a second. So the first one we're going to talk about is, how does a something work? And for these questions, I really want you to look at the everyday items, things that we use every day that we don't know how they work. For example, looking around me, I have a computer chip here. Do I know how a computer chip works? Absolutely not. I have no idea. Do I know how my mouse works? Absolutely not. I have no idea. So we can start off by thinking about the things that we look at every day to create a curiosity about our everyday world. This is the childlike approach. Children always want to ask why or how does it work? And so we want to go back to that curiosity because we sometimes forget it as adults. Are there any other ways to do this? We sometimes think about creativity as being producing something new, but creativity can also be about creating a new process, a new way to do something. That can be really powerful as well. The next one is reverse creativity. So you want to imagine a world where, and then say, how did we get to this world? So for example, imagine a world where there are no traffic jams. How did we get to a world with no traffic jams? So we're thinking about problems in reverse, imagining a world where things are different, and then saying, how did we get to that world? And then finally, a last question that you can bring in is, let me tell you about a real problem. So we want to bring in problems where there isn't necessarily one right answer and all of the answers are wrong. Maybe a moral question, for example, a real world moral question. We don't know the answer to this question. And so creativity is the only way we can think about it. On to TikTok. What can we learn about creativity from TikTok? So this is not an advert for TikTok at all, but I do think that, love it or hate it, TikTok is an incredibly powerful cultural tool, incredibly powerful tool for creators who are wanting to make something new. And every day, probably millions of people use it to be creative. So why are people able to be so creative on TikTok? Well, I think what TikTok makes is a small box. It's not, you can, I guess, just go on the platform and make something completely new. But what you're often encouraged to do is take an audio that other people have used, or take maybe some music that other people have used and apply it to a situation that is familiar to you. So you're taking this phrase, maybe, for example, this is one that's really popular now. It's, is it too late now to say sorry, by Justin Bieber? And then there's a response which says, yes. And people have taken this and they've used that phrase in a really creative way, maybe talking about an author, their husband, a child, or even a pothole. So this is creativity with a very tight structure. They use this audio and they only have about 10 or 15 seconds to use this audio to create something new. So I'm not saying that you should use TikTok in your class necessarily, but we do want to take that idea of making a very, very small box. And that helps students feel not overwhelmed at the prospect of being creative in class. So let's look at some examples of that. What you can do is take in a pre-existing story and write it in a new format. So maybe a story like Little Red Riding Hood, but you're writing it as a diary from the perspective of the wolf. So they have the story already there, but they're going to have to see it from a new perspective in a different way. Maybe it is, a different character or a different genre as well, or both. This is a super creative task that I made that helps. It's free, guys, don't worry. I'm not going to try and make you buy something. This is free. This is a situation where a PowerPoint where you have a bunch of different conversations between two characters, and the students just have to continue the conversation. So not only do they have the characters, but they have the start. And so their small box is they just have to write or speak the next line of dialogue. Another creative small box activity is, if this is the answer, what is the question? So maybe the answer is 17, and students have to come up with a question where the answer could be 17. And then finally, think about using the question, how many uses can you think of for, and then an everyday object, maybe a frisbee. You know, we use a frisbee to throw, but we could also use it as a plate or a hat. So these are your small box activities. Now, it does give a lot of structure, but really importantly, there's not a right answer and a wrong answer. There's not even a limited number of answers. The possibilities are completely endless, but the structure we've given them is pretty set. And finally, what can we learn from Shakespeare about creativity? So what Shakespeare does is exactly the opposite. I don't know if you know the play, A Midsummer Night's Dream, but basically 4 characters, 4 lovers are taken out of the city. I think they run away, and they run away from the city into this woodland, the forest. And the city is a very kind of socially constrained, rule-oriented place, but in the forest, anything can happen. It's a wild place, and crazy things happen. Like the queen of the fairies can fall in love with a donkey, and all of these things which are upside down and back to front and different. And what Shakespeare does when he creates these plays is he completely destroys the box. He takes the normal things that happen every day that we don't even think about, and he takes those away. Yeah, think outside the box. Yeah, I would say destroy the box. Get rid of the box completely. So we can do that in our classroom in some simple ways. We can destroy the box that our students normally exist in. So the routines that normally exist and the social structures that normally exist in the classroom are, for example, the teacher talks. What happens if you just stop talking and you only mime? What happens if you're not in charge anymore? What happens if you completely change the way that your classroom looks? You know, we can see some examples here that I pulled from Google. What happens if students are learning in a tent, or they feel like they're learning underwater? What happens if you don't do your normal routine? Maybe you change up the order of your activities. And finally, classroom objects don't normally talk. What would happen if we gave some classroom objects the ability to talk? A bit like what Nathan was saying, you know, with what if your house could speak? What about the objects in your classroom? What would they say if they could speak? You might not want to do all of these at once, or it would be complete chaos. But doing just one will disrupt your students' normal cognitive patterns, their normal ways of thinking, and challenge them to be creative. Because when the social structures, the physical environment, when those change, students have to be creative, and they're going to come up with something new. So Yeah, that's the end of my talk, guys. If you would like to connect with me, please do on social media, on LinkedIn, or you can follow the Twinkl ESL page. And yeah, I hope that's helpful for you. I can see one question's already. How to help creativity is not appreciated in some cultural settings or even individual families. How to help those students who are criticized for being creative? Oh, that's a big one. I think your first step there is to sit down and talk to the individual student and have a talk with them just one-on-one and help them, learn about what maybe they have a particular dream that they want to achieve, that is, to be a creative person in some form or other, and then how you can help them to get there and help them know that, okay, in the house, maybe that's something not that, oh, this is so difficult, as a teacher, we can't really often get involved in changing perceptions within the home, but maybe in the classroom, they can have some space to be creative. And then later on, if it's appropriate, maybe talk to the parents and see, have a very open conversation, trying to understand their point of view as well. But just maybe, help them to think a little bit about why creativity can be a good thing, even if you want to be an engineer, even if it, the kid is going to be an accountant. We've all heard about creative accounting. So yeah, any more questions?
Hello.
Hi.
Mubarak here, ma'am. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thanks for your invaluable insight. Extending my sincere thanks to organizer for this opportunity. Ma'am, you are talking about the 20% important skill about isn't creativity, madam. My question is, why creativity is essential in leadership and how to cultivate it? Thanks for the opportunity.
Let me clarify your question. Your question is creativity important for leadership?
Yes, and how to cultivate it?
Okay, how to cultivate creativity in leadership. Oh, that's a great question. I think looking at, you have to understand where people's resistance to creativity is coming from. And quite often it's coming from fear. So helping leaders know that they will not be punished for their creativity is really, really important, because leaders often feel like they have a lot to lose, especially in other people's perception of their competence. And also creating a space where leaders feel able to admit when they made a mistake, which is really, really hard to do. And helping them be comfortable with ambiguity. So situations where they don't have all of the information, but they still have to make a decision, and helping them know that they will not be punished if they make the wrong decision. Yeah. Does that help?
Thanks for your insight and thanks for the opportunity.
Not so much creativity for accounting. Well, there is, if you just look at some of the political leaders right now who are being punished for their creative accounting, you'll see that, yeah, there are some different ways that you can present numbers that, yes, different areas of engineering. Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's all, look at Leonardo da Vinci, he was an engineer and he was incredibly creative. Yeah, no, sorry. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Miranda. That was really amazing presentation. Thank you so much for your time and, your efforts and everything.
Thank you. Thank you for being a great chair.
Thank you so much.
Inspiring as Miranda. Thank you so much for joining us. We're honored to have you and representing Twinkl today here.
Oh, no, likewise. Thanks for putting everything together.
Thank you.
All right.